When I spoke to Julie and the team last year, and they said, oh, can you come and speak at this conference? It's like, yeah, sure. You know, I've spoken about financial advisory services and a whole bunch of like future forward visions for that. But it's really interesting with this intersection with the medical community. We've got a lot of friends that are surgeons and doctors, and I sort of joke with their spouses when we're sort of out and about that, you know, we're there sort of making a living, speaking on stage and pontificating about the future, whilst they're up to their elbows in blood and guts saving people's lives. It's a very different world, isn't it? So these are an important community for the whole of humanity, and in Canada, these are the people that we not only support, but we trust. And this presentation is going to go through a number of different movements. I'm going to talk a little bit about, you know, the generations that we have around us, how wealth is moving, young physicians. Then I'm going to get into technology and the evolution of planning to see where we're going. Because we're on the cusp of a massive amount of change. But what does that look like? If we believe mainstream media and people on the radio and TV, it's like we've got Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator walking around the corner and Skynet becoming active in 3 years, right? That's not the future. Trust me. Okay, let's think about generations. I could have put together dozens of slides talking about the differences between boomers and Gen Xers. I'm a Gen Xer. A lot of people in the room are Gen Xers as well. And millennials, I'm sure there's some millennials in the room too. But really, you know, we're humans. We still, you know, crave certainty and variety and significance and connection and love. We want to contribute and we want to have growth in our lives. It's how we've been for thousands of years. It's how we'll be for thousands of years into the future. We're kind of the same. I actually feel that if I was living today, but I was 20 years old, I'd think very, very similarly to a millennial, just with a different way of looking at the world. But then thinking about what's going to happen between those generations is really important, especially from an advisory perspective, because there's going to be a massive amount of wealth movement. In fact, some people are saying that there's going to be about a $30 trillion wealth movement in North America towards millennials in the next 2 or 3 decades. You know, that's assets and liquid cash and savings and whatever, investments. That's a huge responsibility that we have to give the advice to people to do the right thing and to plan for their future. What's really interesting, between 2031 and 2045, 10% of that wealth is going to be changing every 5 years. I actually think it could be changing a lot more quickly. People are seeing new ways of investing and moving money around. And, you know, the big question that I have is wealth and money and savings as important today as it was, say, 20 years ago? And our mindset's different. If we look into Canada, we can actually see that we're going to expect about a $750 billion windfall from the aging relatives of the next decade alone. So, you know, this is how, you know, millennials and people at that age can actually afford to buy a house in Vancouver. You can't. You just have to have it coming down from your parents. What's really interesting is that there's a change in an understanding around expectance of inheritance as well. So only 48% of boomers are expecting anything, compared to 62% of people like me. I don't care about inheritance. I told my parents to go and spend all the money they have. In fact, I'm giving them money to have more fun in their later years. And 80% of millennials are really expecting it because life's getting tougher, it's getting more expensive, right? Abundance and exponential change comes with this hangover of the world being more expensive. So then I started to think, okay, what about young physicians? How's their mindset actually changing today? And when I look at that, young physicians, we're looking at those that are, you know, in their late 20s into their early 40s as well. And they're millennials mostly. So I love pulling this up. Here's a tweet from Time magazine. 81% of millennials are more likely to spend on travel than save for the future. And the millennials come back and say, what future? I mean, people are wondering where we're going to be in 5 years, not in 35 years now. The old world was like, hey, we're going to go to college for all those years. We're going to train to be a physician and then to become a surgeon and a specialist and whatever. Then we're going to create that practice, going to get married, have children, and retire. Actually, the new world is very different. People aren't caring as much about owning vehicles, owning homes. It's the first generation that doesn't really know the idea of privacy, and we've seen what's been happening with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica recently, yeah? In fact, Mark Zuckerberg's going up in front of the Senate today to apologize for what's been happening. I don't know how much the world's really going to change. But I don't think that people are going to think about having a single practice for the rest of their life either. They're going to think about flexible living and global travel, and they're not even going to think about retirement. They're going to work and work and work and work, especially when we think about technologies that are going to help us to live for even longer, right? Us being wise comes through age and experience. When I looked at this slide, I went out and I spoke to a number of my friends that were working for themselves. And overwhelmingly, they did things on their own terms, and they took a lot of time off. And one particular great friend of mine, he actually works in a walk-in clinic. He takes two months off a year, and he does things on his own terms. And he'll never, ever open his own practice, and he'll never, ever plan the way that other doctors have planned before. So the world is changing. It's kind of like a millennial Zen Buddhism, right? Can you live out of 2 suitcases and not have a home? Can you be that flexible? The human body's the same halfway around the world as it is in Canada. So really, the skills are portable, although the amount of retraining that you have to do if you're a doctor coming to Canada is kind of ridiculous, right? What's really interesting about this younger physician mindset, the millennial mindset, is that the millennials are struggling with the idea of traditional banks and traditional investing. So 71% of millennials would rather go to the dentist than listen to a bank's message. They equate going to a bank like having a root canal. It's that painful. And 2 weeks ago, I went into a bank, and it was the most horrific and painful experience that I've had in recent times. I do everything online. In fact, 75% of these younger physicians and millennials would prefer financial services from people like Google, Amazon, and PayPal. In fact, one of the biggest changes that's going to be coming is these companies becoming banks. And in fact, these companies could even start circulating their own currencies as well, and could potentially take over the entire sort of currency system of places like the US and Canada. That's a scary thought. But really, this is about financial freedom. It's about thinking about saving for something different. Travel, dining, fitness. Living life to the fullest. We buy experiences, we don't buy things. This is why there's the retail apocalypse that's happening right now. It's very hard to sell more stuff, but it's very easy to persuade people to go and have one of those life-changing moments on top of Mount Everest, right? It's what people want to do. So these younger people are actually now saving towards their desired lifestyle goals. And only about 1/3 of them are really planning for retirement. It's really interesting. I'm 45. I've got an investment advisor, and he's awesome. And I sort of wonder, what the hell am I doing? Because I'm going to be doing this until I literally have to be dragged off of stage, as a babbling old man, And I'm still going to come back on stage again, right? I'm still going to be working. I think that's going to be the mantra going forward. So it doesn't surprise me that a lot of young people aren't really planning for that retirement. But with that, they're also feeling isolated and lonely. They're feeling a form of financial paralysis. They're feeling like they're struggling. I'll be honest with you. 6 years ago, I didn't bother with saving. I'd made some property investments. It just sort of, as I went through life, I didn't have any RRSPs. I panicked, right? You feel like it, but it's like because people don't have the faith that everything's going to be okay. So now I've got back on the wagon, and I've really worked out what's going to be happening with my life. But now I'm still questioning it, because it's like my advisor says, okay, if you're going to live until you're 85, then we need to save this much money. And it's like, so I'm just going to stop having fun and earning money and doing things that are valuable in the world, and I'm going to have to work out how to eke an existence on my pension? Doesn't seem like the life for me. But at the same time, there's this tension inside. And there's something really interesting The younger people don't really want to be managed. They like to be led and coached and mentored. This is who we are, coaches. Not the people that just say, this is what you must do. It's like, I understand who you are. I know what you want out of life. You know, we're friends, right? And let me coach you through that, because I can help you get further. So that's just a little perspective on generations and how we're changing. Some of this may have rung true. As I do my research, this all sort of comes into the stark brightness of day about the world is changing. And the world has been changing as well because of technology. And I like to just ground us in how we've progressed to where we are today. This is a guy called Douglas Engelbart. In Stanford in 1968, just 50 years ago, Douglas Engelbart sat down and he gave a demonstration of a personal computer with desktop publishing, a trackpad and a mouse, hyperlinking, which is the precursor to the modern internet, visual feeds, which are precursor to things like Skype. And it was called the mother of all demos. You can go onto YouTube and you can watch this 2-hour grainy black and white footage of him demonstrating the world's first personal computer. And a lot of people didn't think that it was going to be a big impact on the world. It's like, sure, who's going to want to have a computer in their home? But now we've got a world that's connected through mobile. Is there anyone in the room that doesn't have a mobile phone? Yeah? Even last year, I was getting 1 or 2 people putting their hands up, and you know, I'd wax lyrically about, oh, that's the people that work in security, right? Is there anyone in the room that doesn't have a smartphone? Again, that's 100% coverage, right? In 2007, Steve Jobs stood up and he held up the first generation iPhone. He said, in my hand I have an internet communicator, a music player, and a phone, and it was the iPhone. In 2017, he held up the iPhone 10. Well, he didn't, Tim Cook did. Right? But really, we've come a long way. We've come a long way so far that over 6 billion people in the world have now got access to mobile communications. That's more people in the world that have actually got access to clean running water. Now, think about this. What's more important in life? Communications. About 1/3 of those are smartphones. But by 2020, 6 billion people in the world will have access to smartphones. That completely changes how business works, right? Exponential change, exponential growth. The world's not changing in small steps anymore. It's leaping over innovation after innovation. If someone comes up with a smartphone in 2007, then suddenly you've got 100 companies coming up with a smartphone in 2010, and you've got 1,000 companies doing it in 2012. You know, the growth and growth and growth. This is how change happens, exponentially. And exponential change is happening to your industry with the technologies that are coming. And a lot of these technologies are coming faster than we've ever seen before. In fact, that exponential growth can be seen in the markets. So this is a slightly old slide, but really, in 2016, the 5 most valuable companies in the world by market cap were Apple, Alphabet, who's Google's parent company, Microsoft, Amazon, and Facebook. And now they're in the race to see who will become the world's first trillion-dollar company. These 5 companies in 2017 put $800 billion on their market cap. Hands up how many people that told their clients to invest all of their money in these 5 companies in 2017. Would have been a really, really good idea. That's not our business, right? Very risky. I mean, Facebook's lost about $30 billion in value in the last month because of the calamity that's happened there. And Trump's been attacking Amazon, and that lost 5% of its value in about a week. It's a strange world we live in, right? That's not the game that we play. But when I think about technology, I think about foundational elements. The first foundational element is around big data. I've been working in data for over 20 years in rooms like this, big server farms, very cold. But data is the new oil, and ultimately it's unlimited. And it'll be generated at 163 zettabytes per year by 2025. Now, this year it'll be about 6 zettabytes. So that exponential growth can be seen. What does 163 zettabytes look like? Imagine a billion high-definition movies per year. And we're only going to be able to use about 0.5% to 1% of that data for anything useful. We're going to be in a world that bleeds data and collects data. And that data that's collected is going to be centered around who we are, and we are going to become the product if we not already are today. But it's really useful. If you look at old models of information theory, then they still stand true today. You know, data becomes information after it goes through a transformation. Then it becomes knowledge once we start understanding what's happening there. But ultimately, it goes from knowledge into wisdom, and that's who we are. I truly believe that we're in the wisdom economy, and we are the people that are going to be driving that forward. Medical technology as well has been sort of leaping ahead, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. I get really excited about medical technology. I think that we're in a world that's going to change rapidly. Some 5 years ago, I was at a conference and I had an RFID chip put in my left hand. I can now open my front door with my hand using an RFID reader at home, and suddenly I no longer lose my keys, right? That's just implantable technology. That's not even medical, but those kinds of things are coming to our world. And really it is about disruption. It's a word that's used a lot. But how serious is it? I think we should take things very, very seriously when we think about our industries. We need to say to ourselves every day, someone else will come up with a product this week that's going to change our industry. It's happening that quickly. If you look at the medical field, changes are coming in quite drastically. Waiting rooms are dead. Yeah? We don't necessarily even need to go and see a doctor. For years, I went to walk-in clinics, or I saw doctors through telepresence. I didn't even have to bother, actually going to a particular person. This very famous guy talks about the digitization of health. Dr. Eric Topol, if you can ever see him, he's amazing. When I went to medical school, the term digital applied only to rectal exams. It's true, right? And now things have changed. Digital is everywhere. The XPrize, which is led by Peter Diamandis and smart people down in Silicon Valley, said, why can't we build the tricorder from Star Trek? Yeah, you remember like Bones from Star Trek would run up to Jim Kirk and be like, zzz, Well, they did it last year. So they built a device that could diagnose 14 different ailments using an off-the-shelf mobile device with some extra special peripherals. It's pretty special stuff, right? We now no longer have to necessarily have endoscopies and things like that. We can now have pills that we swallow with high-definition cameras that travel through our body and take pictures. It's pretty interesting stuff. The robotic surgery industry is gaining a huge pace. Yeah, you see the Da Vinci robot and other robots there. We're actually going to see the growth of 18% by 2025, and we're going to exceed about $1 billion by 2020. In fact, some of the reports out there are saying, certainly down in the US, 75% of surgeons that are graduating today are struggling to find work because so many hospitals have got robotic surgery there. They can actually put people through very simple procedures more quickly. Why do we need so many surgeons? Specialist surgeons, we need more than ever before. And we can take pills that dissolve in our stomach that have got a protein that then send a message to an application to say that medication's been taken. Someone's got dementia, or there's some issues with someone that doesn't remember to do that. We can now track that. That can be incredibly important. It can be a lifesaver. Technology isn't just, circuit boards. And genome editing is incredibly exciting as well. Who's done like Ancestry.com DNA testing or 23andMe or anything like that? Anyone? Yeah, a few people. Be a bit careful about where your data is and what permission you give around that. But really, the genome today costs less than $1,000 to sequence for everyone, right? It used to cost $100 million per person, only 15 years ago. But now the genome editing market is to reach about $6.28 billion by 2022. In fact, genome editing and using technologies like CRISPR to edit our DNA to be able to fix congenital problems in our systems is now going ahead. In China, they've tested it on about 100 people already, with mixed results, but this is the beginning of the testing experience. And then into the scary world and exciting world of artificial intelligence. Now, when we talk about artificial intelligence, and earlier I said, Terminator's not going to walk around the corner, Skynet isn't going to be there. It comes down to what Rodney Brooks calls these 7 things that we get wrong about AI, and I'd really like you to remember this, so that going forward, when you read all these articles, you can think, people do overestimate what things can do. And they can underestimate what things can do, which can get us into a pickle as well. We imagine that it's magic. Suddenly, we're going to be able to point a smartphone at something, and it's going to be able to recognize who it is, bring up all their data, suddenly predict what they're going to do in the next 5 days, and give us that information. Not necessarily happening. Performance versus competence. You might have an AI that can do a lot of things very quickly, but how well can it do it? Suitcase words. We just put everything into the term artificial intelligence. It's not necessarily how it is. You might have predictive analytics, you might have certain kinds of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and we just hang the superhuman power to that. And exponential, sometimes, the exponential curve that I was talking about, sometimes it doesn't always happen that way. Exponentially, if we would have looked at storage on say, an iPhone, if that would have followed a true exponential curve, your iPhone would store about 17 terabytes worth of data today. It doesn't. In fact, it's painful when we run out of data, right? Run out of storage on our phone. And then Hollywood scenarios, Skynet, Terminator, whatever. We've let science fiction run away with itself. It's easier to imagine what a robot can do versus understand that a robot is incredibly limited in what it can do, even though it can do that very, very well. And really, speed of deployment, it does take time to push things through. But by 2030, we're going to be in a position where AI will be the absolute game changer for everything in the world. Andrew Ng, who's one of the founders of Coursera, is also used to be the chief science officer of Baidu. He actually says that artificial intelligence is the new electricity. In 1900, when electricity really started to take hold, the entire world changed, right? In fact, this entire conference is powered by electricity as well as human power as well. But a $15.7 trillion boost to GDP worldwide. And about 60% of that is around really making the market work better. About 40% of that is making us work better, and productivity. But what about artificial intelligence in healthcare? Where's that hitting? How's that going to change the landscape? There's a huge potential. There's a massive potential for machine learning to improve the current healthcare system. And we want to continue to be at the forefront of innovation in the field. And there's some people like Jeremy Irvin that are putting together papers that are looking into the future and seeing how things are different. In fact, down in Stanford, researchers have developed an artificial intelligence algorithm that actually does diagnosis based off of X-ray images. 14 kinds of medical conditions can be diagnosed now using artificial intelligence immediately. Imagine this kind of scale that you can get with that. You don't have a doctor spending, half an hour or an hour looking at one patient. You have AI that takes about a second, it's done. And it goes through all the patients. And it might find things that we miss as humans. Because, we're fallible to err as human. And then we've got companies like Path.ai that are starting to really step into the world of AI in the medical field. They actually think that their machine learning and sophisticated software tools are going to assist a pathologist with analysis. So they're going to improve the accuracy of those doctors because they're going to work together to get through that data and work out what's happening before they've had a chance to look at those results. The new world is doctor and the machine. Let's remove the drudge work out of the way, and let's use the specialism and the wisdom of who we are in the medical field. But then I started saying, okay, we've got all of this tech, and we've got all of these smart people that are looking to invest. What does that do for them? It's really interesting. The tech space is full of investors that are super jaded. However, the medical space is willing to engage more than traditional investors in versus the last several decades of medical innovations in the sector, because it's kind of not been that great. But today it's really exciting with machine learning, 3D printing of organs, and a whole bunch of different things. The frontiers are being pushed forward, and progress is going ahead faster than ever before. What doctors do on a daily basis is there's a lot of repetition. But what they want to do is they want to dream, and they want to build and create. But their day jobs don't allow for that. So there's companies that are stepping forward to help them and to connect them. So there's two companies, FundRx and AngelMD. One's in New York and one's in Seattle. They're connecting physicians with money, that's spare money, so maybe slightly older, with medical startups in need of funding, right? You need that from an advisory perspective and from a cash perspective. So everything from being able to access these funds on your mobile, through a mobile application, all the way through to accessing them through a website as the beginning of the journey of investment. It's really interesting when you see a lot of these innovations. These companies don't innovate without doctors behind them. And the doctors don't start to make the wise decisions without having a balanced view of what investment looks like, and that's what we look at as well, right? And this ushers in this new world for us. The world of what I'm saying is the advisor and the machine. So I'm going to start with bots. And we've heard a lot about robo-advisors, right? And how the world's changing there. Well, I kind of think the bots started a little bit in the 90s. Who remembers Clippy from Microsoft? It looks like you're writing a resignation letter. Yes, I am. Clippy is dead, unfortunately. But like, what I think is really interesting was, we've been playing with this space for a long, long time. We've realized that humans kind of do need a little bit of help to get through the drudge that we have to, right? In fact, digital assistants are one of the biggest areas of growth. By 2021, about 1.8 billion digital assistants are going to be used around the world. Transactions without humans at one end, right? So these companies like Fin.ai, a great friend of mine actually runs that company, Digit, Zobi, whoever, are coming up with these digital advisors. And the robo-advisors are coming, and they're incredibly effective. I'm just going to quickly play this video for you.
Robo-advisor Pepper is greeting customers in front of a bank in Japan. Right now, it's only in charge of assisting simple bank duties and introducing new products, but soon enough, the robot will be expected to work at the counter as well. That means Pepper can go beyond simple information processing and communicate with customers by interpreting their facial expressions and actions. The idea of replacing fund and asset managers with the so-called robo-advisors has become more popular since 2008 due to the cheap commission fee of 0.15% and the ability to function for longer periods of time. This trend can be seen in Korea as well, with financial institutes rolling out these intelligent machines at the beginning of the year to aid in investment. One example in case is a brokerage firm. With simple data like the principal and desired return input, the machine advisor offers investment options based on 900 trillion pieces of data it has studied. The results gleaned from robo-advisors like these have so far been successful. Over the past 2 months, while the return from robo-advisors was around 2%, local equity funds and shares on the Kospi saw losses.
I think robo-advisors will be more successful in the future if they are able to incorporate the emotional element of humans.
Fascinating, hey? Processing more data than we can do. They're awake 24/7, 365, so when our clients are up at 4 a.m. in the morning, they're there, we're not, generally, right? And what this young man actually says at the end is something really important. If they can just put the emotion in there as well, we're going to be really good. But that's who we are, right? Empathy, creativity, problem solving, emotion. It can't be easily encoded. It's not coming to AI very quickly. But those robo-advisors are going to manage about 10% of global assets by 2020. So the world is changing. If you've ever installed an application like Wealthsimple and just signed up for a plan, has anyone done that? You should do it. You should do it immediately and see what they do. It's interesting. Super simple. What's your goal? This is what we're going to do. Put this much in a month. Good. Leave it. And then we're going to keep communicating. Yeah? That's how some people want to operate in the world. And there is an impact. right? So this company in Japan, the Mizuho Financial Group, is planning to cut 19,000 jobs over the next 10 years or so as the competitive market undergoes drastic changes because of this spread of fintech and artificial intelligence and robo-advisement. So we're going to see a change in the landscape. What's that going to do for us? These are big questions. Companies like Wealthfront and Betterment, WealthBar, Acorns are actually there to bridge that gap for people that don't have much time, that do want to invest. The robo-advisors are here. And then I think it's really interesting where we can get into a world where we're not even looking at our phones and we're just having conversations into thin air with things like Amazon Alexa. Does anyone have an Apple HomePod or Google Home or Amazon Alexa, yeah? Wow. That's a lot of people, hey? It's interesting. Your kids have now got a new big sister, and she knows everything about the world. In fact, they're sort of putting parents out of business a little bit, right? I think I'm joking. I'm not joking at all. Imagine when you used to sit down with your kids and they'd, Dad, what's the capital of Indonesia? Let's go and look. And you pick out an old atlas and you'd go through and they'd learn about the world and they'd ask other questions and whatever. And now Alexa just tells them. And they go about their day. And there's a lack of learning in the world. And they take all of the decision making that we need to make in our lives and simplify it all, right? What's really interesting is the banks, investment houses, are actually looking at this very seriously. So UBS has partnered with Amazon to enable machine to answer current and important economic queries, right? It can assess the impact of a Fed rate increase on the US economy. From that, then people can start thinking about their own investments. People like payments.com is a really good website thinking about the whole payments industry. Worked with a number of large companies and small companies to see what they could do with Alexa to make the world easier so that, technology becomes invisible, advisement becomes simple, and the world changes. And then I have to talk about blockchain. I never used to talk about it that much, but everyone needs me to talk about blockchain today, right? We know what blockchain is. Some of us know what it is. It's a software protocol, it's a decentralized and open ledger, a secure network. It's the thing that goes underneath cryptocurrencies, but that's just one application, right? It's a way of thinking differently about storing data and having transactional relationships with our clients. So simplistically put, instead of having a central database with all of our information in it, the blockchain is everyone has a distributed ledger. Everyone in this room would know every transaction encrypted from everyone else, so that any part of the room could just disappear or go offline, and the whole system still has complete integrity, and it's encrypted, right? This is completely going to change how we transact in banking, in investments, with our clients. In fact, there's so many different kinds of solutions hitting the market now that we're going to see massive changes coming. So everything from protocols and infrastructure to middleware and dev tech, capital and liquidity, and applications as well. And within that applications comes cryptocurrency. But what's really great about this technology is it reduces the transactional costs, right? And it unbundles ownership. Right, we use SWIFT to move money between countries, right? That system is 44 years old. So here comes exponential change, SWIFT is gone. Oh, yeah, SWIFT is gone within a couple of years, right? And smart contracts. On the blockchain, you can actually have an indelible record of two people transacting. So think about that. Think about the amount of times that, we've lost your records, we don't know when that happened, whatever, that was completely gone. And PwC did a study recently. They said about 77% of people expect to adopt blockchain as a production system by 2020. So it's coming to every single part of our business and all of our clients' businesses as well. Okay, hands up who got into Bitcoin a few years ago. One person at the back. Yeah. I hope you bought lots of Bitcoin years ago. Well, a $10,000 investment made in 2012 will be worth about $18 million today. You can't predict this as investment advisors, right? I don't think anyone could have predicted it. My interesting friend that lived in East Vancouver had a back room full of servers mining Bitcoin in 2013. I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, mining Bitcoin. It's like, seems ridiculous. He's worth about $50 million. you know, the change is there. But what's really interesting is attitudes. Younger people's attitudes towards Bitcoin is this. 30% would choose Bitcoin over government bonds, 22% would choose Bitcoin over buying real estate, and 90% would choose Bitcoin over gold. Now, there is fluctuations. It's still worth a lot of money. There's a lot of speculation there. I've actually got a friend that exited his $20,000 investment that he made a few years ago, took out $4.6 million and bought a hotel in Florida. It's a strange world, huh? And this is how I feel about it all, really. One, why didn't I get into it that early? But mostly, like, this isn't smart. A lot of people are saying cryptocurrencies expect net value zero. I actually think that cryptocurrencies are only really useful when you can actually use them. You can't really buy things with Bitcoin at the moment. It's difficult to get your money out. You have to make lots of phone calls, and there's some sneaky people in Chicago that will help you. I wish I was joking, this is true. But what about the evolution of planning? You know, we've talked about, you know, AI, we've talked about the changes in technology. You know, how are we going to evolve and what's sensible there? Well, advisors must use automation and behavioral management alongside portfolio and planning services to be competitive in the future. We have to get engaged. We have to use this new technology. We saw on the video earlier about using iPads for signing documentation and whatever. Yes, that's a step forward, but it's going to go a lot further. Remember this, data, information, wisdom, right? Data, information, knowledge, wisdom. We're at the top. Well, you know, we pull the data, we meet the client, we teach and coach them, we give them judgment, advice, and action. Well, artificial intelligence is going to come in and be our friend, and we're going to work with the algorithms and that artificial intelligence to change the world. In fact, the world's going to change, so it's going to be like we have a Harvard grad on our team with 800 years of experience and looks and impacts every financial event around the world every day and knows every client anniversary and all sources of all that information that applies to your book. And it's going to be our best friend, right? AI is going to do the drudge work of pulling data, coming up with, transforming that into information and usable knowledge. But hey, we're going to be at the top because it's advisor and the machine. And we're at the top, and here we are. Human and AI will work together to develop wisdom that we've never thought about before in terms of investment. And we're going to work with people that have got a completely different perspective on the world, that are going to be more complex to manage going ahead. Because they're not looking to retire, they're not looking to own things. They've got an interesting and diverse view of the world. They don't want to invest in oil and fossil fuels. They want to have a green perspective on their investment portfolio. It's a lot more complex as a world. And then, you know, we've still got this issue of empathy, human creativity, and problem solving needing to be part of the mix, and that's us, right? Get good at telling jokes, people. Hey, like someone said this to me the other day. It was a doctor down in Silicon Valley. I'm making a documentary at the moment on human performance, and she said, yeah, but that computer's not going to give you a hug. And I said, when has my doctor ever given me a hug? She gave me a hug, so that was pretty cool. But the new world is about hybridity. We're going to become cyborgs, hybrids. We're going to change. We're going to look at robo-advisory and advisory working together. So if you think about it, robo-advisory, you know, you've got onboarding and omni-channel access, tax loss harvesting, real-time reporting. We hate doing that stuff, right? Someone else can do that, a smart machine. We can trust them to do that. And as an advisor, we can do that holistic view. We can look at universal product offerings and new kinds of product offerings. We can build accountability and trust. We can put more time into the relationship. And ultimately, that hybrid model optimizes financial advice going forward, which is better for you and better for the clients, which is the important thing, right? So for us, we've got more capacity, so we can have more clients, and we can attract and retain more of them. We can enhance our digital capability. We can get better at our jobs. We can learn more. And for the customer, they can get access whenever they need it. They've got flexible fee structures and holistic wealth management. So it's a win-win for everyone, right? And this is going to be a really important model to move towards. I think this delivers a number of different opportunities for us as well. And you know, when I come to these presentations, it's like, yeah, but what can we do, right? So I put together 4 or 5 different ideas of what we can do. Number one, most importantly, be the guide for young physicians to help them understand how investments and savings will positively impact their life today. And also more mature physicians and how the world is changing, right? We can't forget everyone. But people that aren't paying attention to the changing in the world need that education as much as young people being listened to. Maybe we can connect them in communities, right? Number two, maintain the human face of advice by providing more empathetic connection while tapping into the power of big data and artificial intelligence. Yeah? Like, how did you come up with that idea or whatever? It's like, well, we've got this system, it goes through these trillions of rows of data, it looks at the markets, and today this is a really great idea because of these reasons. And let's talk about that versus your goals and have the human experience. But it's enabled through artificial intelligence, knowledge, and wisdom. Number three, use channels for connection, and don't be afraid of showing how you live your lives and make your investments as well. How many people talk about their investments with the people that are making investments with them, right? Oh yeah, no, that's about, I'd say about 10% of the audience. Transparency is a currency today with everyone. What do? You know? My guy Stan tells me what he does. In part, not all of it, obviously. And it's heartening to know, because I've kind of got a kinship with him in a way. Number four, create a balanced view of donations to socially conscious, green, and ethical investing for everyone. This is coming. You know, I actually sat down with the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan last November. I didn't know who they were. And then I read about them, I was like, how much? Anyway, I did a completely different presentation to this. It was about exponential technologies and where the world was going. And, I was saying, divest away from fossil fuels and oil. And they were like looking at me shocked. Yeah, the world's changing. New York City is going to have that all removed out of all of its investment funds within 3 years. And it's taking the fossil fuels companies to court because they've ruined the environment. Norway's, who made all of their money from oil and gas, are removing that from their investment portfolio as well. And this is what's happening in the world. And we're getting angry because, people are saying, John Horgan's not letting people run a pipeline through BC and it's going to ruin the Canadian economy. Well, I turn around to the federal government and say, maybe we need to look at new ways of making money that are ethical and green and good for the country, right? I always get into trouble when I go to Alberta, by the way. And I go there a lot. I love it. The oil companies hate me. They really do. And the last one here is, don't be afraid to encourage experimentation, as it keeps investing fresh and exciting. Plus, be supportive of more speculative investing in startups and businesses as part of an investment portfolio. Sure, you might not manage that part of the portfolio, but gain an understanding of what that is. Because do you know what? At one certain point, that physician is going to have invested in a company that's suddenly given them back like $20 million on a $1 million investment. And what they're going to do, they're going to come back to you and say, what do I do now? Well, take some of that money, most of the money, and do some responsible investing with it, right? We live in a world where change is coming. We live in a world where physicians are changing, where the role of being an investment advisor is changing drastically, and we've got to stay ahead of the step of change. So I'd just like to say welcome to the future, and I welcome any questions that you have. Thank you.